Thank you. Did you enjoy seeing this on the screen again?
Very much so.
I
Good shot.
want to get your
Yeah.
on film the way you made it.
Sorry?
Shown on film the way you made it.
Yes. No other way.
So, I have a few questions. One is Hector and the credits mentioned Burt Lancaster. So, my question for you is was Burt ever seriously considered to star in this film, and what was that process of his involvement? Because I think that's kind of an unusual circumstance that most people thinking of this film today would not be aware of.
Well, for the first 14 months of the project's evolution, Burt Lancaster was the sun, the solar system. Everything was revolving around him. It was not. It was a contentious relationship. He did not like. He loved the novel. He did not accept the screenplay. He considered Leonard Schrader to be a typist. And around 7 months into the 14-month stretch, he proposed a solution. He was going to bring an assistant from Rome who could take notes for him so he could express everything that we're doing wrong. And those notes evolved into the Burt Lancaster script. And it was delivered. I had no idea that he was writing a script. It was delivered in April of 1983. And Hector happened to be in town. And we met at Leonard's house. And I had to translate the script into Portuguese for him. And we got about 30 pages in. And all I can remember of that evening was that I've never laughed so hard. I was on the floor. We were all gagging with laughter. It's one of those, it's, you know, almost like something out of like a movie scene. You know, we cannot stop laughing, but we also were crying at the same time because we knew the game was over. And I think Burt was a passive-aggressive person. He was very forceful, but there was a soft side to him, and he expected that we would come and kiss his hand, like Melina kissed the warden's hand, and say, "Oh, thank God, Burt, you've shown us the way." When we didn't do that, he just left us cold, and we never heard from him again.
But was he considering playing one of the characters?
We were developing the project for him as Melina. He was Melina. It's very interesting that you mentioned that.
Yes.
Because that was in April of 83. On my birthday in March, a month before, I get a phone call from a man whose name I did not know. It was an agent in New York. He was partners with a two-man agency, kind of with partner desks, with a guy named Jeff Hunter, who I was ducking because Jeff Hunter was Raul Julia's agent, and he had been haranguing me, give me a date. Raul's got a baby coming. He's got to work. You'll have to. If we're not doing this film, he's got to take a play. But you have to commit. What could I commit? We're waiting for Burt, right? And so I was always ducking Jeff Hunter's calls, and I took this call from his partner without realizing it. And he says, he identifies who he is, and he said, "I've just read Leonard Schrader's script, and it's the best screenplay I've read in 10 years, in which you consider William Hurt." So I'm thinking to myself, you know, I'm not very experienced at that time. Wow, these agents are amazing. I think he's talking about William Hurt for The Political Prisoner, which is Raul Julia's role. And I thought he was knifing his partner's client in the back. But we got through that, and he said, "No, but that's Burt Lancaster." He says, "Yes, I know." His name was Gene Parsagian. He just passed away, actually, in March. "Yes, I know, but if anything happens to Burt Lancaster, would you please consider William Hurt?" Okay. And
William Hurt was actually quite new and hot at that time.
Well, he was very hot.
He had done Altered States and
yeah,
a couple of others, I think.
Gorky Park was, he was actually, at that time, he was doing post on Gorky Park in London.
Body Heat, that was.
Body Heat was
yes,
big,
yes.
yeah, and Altered States, and then one or two other films. But he was like the thinking man's new brand, kind of like the new Brando, the kind of yuppie Brando at the moment.
Yes, but also very much a leading man.
Very much a leading man, very much. Every studio wanted him for something. I mean, he was like the nom du jour, right? And so when we got the Burt Lancaster script, I'll be 6 weeks later, I called up Gene Parsagian and I said, well, you've heard that we've lost Burt Lancaster? Yes. He says, would you, I said, were you serious about William Hurt? He says, of course. I said, has William read the script? No. I want you to tell me if you want me to give it to him. I said, yes, I do. Well, does Hector want him? I said, of course he does. Hector thought it was John Hurt. Elephant Man?
Yes.
David, por que está falando, Dave? No, I'm serious. And he was right?
Well, that would have been interesting, too.
Yeah, sure. But I'll tell you, just to finish this anecdote, 10 years after, let's say 10 years ago, long after the film was finished, I'm speaking to Gene, who's a dear person, and I said, and somehow he told me what happened when he sent William Hurt the script in London, where he was doing post on Corky. He called him up. He called Gene up in the middle of the night. He was inebriated, and said, "Well, I've read 25 pages. What do you think?" And Gene Parsagian said, "Well, it'll either destroy your career or get you your Oscar." "Well, what are you waiting for? Sign me up!" And the rest is history.
I guess so. Well, Gene and you both have Gene to thank then.
Yeah. Oh my God, Gene. Oh Lord. Yeah.
So, talk a little bit. You mentioned the Schrader script. You mentioned this Burt Lancaster script, and of course, this is based on a novel. And had it been turned into a play before?
Yes. Yes. In fact, it was a two-man stage play, minimum. Kind of like minimum, no set, nothing. It could be done anywhere. And Manuel would put it on himself in various European capitals. There's a whole evolution to it, but the short story is that he would basically promote the novel this way. And it was very popular, a stage play in Europe.
Okay.
And it was playing all over South America, and so Manuel was traveling constantly, going to, introduce the play and so forth. So yeah, it was a stage play. And
but Manuel worked on it with Leonard a little, or was it
well,
just aware of what Leonard was doing?
I don't know how much time you want to spend on that. Let me just make it simple. There were what we call, I did a documentary called Tangled Web.
Yes.
And in Tangled Web, I kind of do a graphic which basically gets this idea across. There were dueling screenplays. There were 4 screenplays going on at once. There was Hector had promised Manuel that he could have his first draft. So Manuel was writing his. Basically, it was an extended stage play. Hector had also promised a writer who had done Pichot for him that he would write the screenplay, because these are two. One was in, so that one was in Portuguese. The one Manuel was writing was in what they call Portuñol. It was kind of like a border lingo between Brazil and Spanish, Portuguese and Spanish. Leonard was writing his. I mean, he was the workhorse, and Burt was writing his. And the twain did not meet. Finally, it was Leonard's script.
And Manuel was happy with it, or what?
Well, that's the long story. That's
Okay.
an evolution, but in a nutshell.
But Hector was happy with it.
Hector?
Yes, with Leonard's script.
Yeah, Hector wanted results.
Okay.
Yeah. Manuel and Leonard, as I mentioned, were remarkably alike the characters they were writing. And so they had a long struggle, but eventually they came to understand, appreciate, and really care for each other a lot. So it was that type of an evolutionary process. In the beginning, Leonard was extremely, kind of like, he was a very tightly wound person. Very quiet, but tightly wound, and he was worried that Puig would, the traditional novelist plaint of the screenwriter ruining his material. So he lived with that kind of fear. And he used to do numbers. I figure by now I think I got Puig about 25 to 30% on my side. If I could get him up to 50, I'll be satisfied. He would run numbers on Puig's satisfaction.
So my memory may be a little off on dates and stuff, but you were starting this in like 82 or 83?
82, January 82,
Yes.
remarkably quick.
And 82 and 83, there really wasn't any great knowledge about what became the AIDS epidemic, right? Nobody had really heard of it yet, or it was just starting.
Well, let me tell you the whopper.
Yeah.
The whopper is that on July, I'm going to pick a date, July 28th, whatever it was, that Friday that the film opened in Cinema One in New York across from Bloomingdale's. This is 2 months after Cannes, so it was like wham, it was like a tsunami. That morning, that Friday morning, every single newspaper, and this is pre-internet, so there's only newspapers.
Right.
Every single newspaper in America carried the same headline, Rock Hudson dying.
Right.
And I was in a state of shock because there were Jewish mothers lining up at 9 o'clock in the morning with their Bloomingdale shopping bags, gabbing amongst themselves for the 12 o'clock show. They were lining up 3 hours in the morning, early, worried about their gay sons. Everyone's, living in complete, terror of what is this all about, the gay cancer. And it's my definition of zeitgeist. It was the zeitgeist. The character of Melina is a gay martyr. Rock Hudson was whatever we want to label that as. He was, had a complex life. And it was just in the air.
Well, but at the same time, the idea of homosexuality and all of it was not at all accepted.
Oh, completely not.
And especially someone as effeminate as the Melina character.
Correct. And the log line of you had a marketing line. So it was like the ultimate anti-marketing line. It was a fag and a commie in a jail cell. Who do you hate worse? Who do you not relate to more?
Oh my God.
A fag and a commie, right?
So what were the challenges of trying to make this movie and actually get it released and get it? Was that something that you came across on a regular basis as far as distribution or even financing? People saying
this film was financed by art collectors, friends of mine, friends of Hector's. There was not a cent of industry money in it. I have a wonderful collection of rejection letters because the script had an incredible punch to it. It had incredible power. People like, in the industry, names that they were astonished by that we couldn't touch it. This is an amazing, of course I can't, right?
Right.
So there was no chance in the world that would ever have distribution. We made it because we had friends who, it's like having a rich uncle or something, friends who thought, okay, all right, go ahead, do your art project,
So you managed to get one of the hottest box office stars, and at the same time you have this incredibly difficult material, and you have a very challenging role for that star, but then at the same time, to make things even more box office challenging, you shoot in Sao Paulo and have this whole kind of political context of the film. So could you talk about shooting down there and what that was?
Well, shooting in Sao Paulo was very strange. It was supposed to be a 60-day schedule, which was like a long schedule, but it went to 104. So
wow.
Yeah, and burnt through all the money that I'd put aside, my piggy bank for the post. But that's the next step, right? But what was interesting to me, I had been an old Brazilian. I speak the language, and I've been going there since I was a kid, actually. And this was the last of, I believe, 8 generals. It was a military dictatorship. I was actually there in 1964 when the CIA coup overthrew the government. And there was a series of generals from the southernmost state, like Texas generals, okay? And the last one was João Figueiredo, and he was still president when we were shooting. And there was a feeling that at any moment we could be shut down and put away, because we're making a film about a military dictatorship at the waning last moments of a military dictatorship, and no one noticed.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, how long? I didn't know this had a little bit of a long gestation period as far as editing is concerned. What was
Well, it's somehow the number 14 months reoccurs. 14 months is actually, it went very quickly in film, in kind of like development hell terms. It was 14 months from January 82 till Burt Lancaster's script came in April. That was 14 months. And it was 14 months in editing. Now, in the 35 millimeter universe,
Right.
if you're editing for 2 months, okay, when are you going to finish? When you get into the third month, there's something's wrong. When you get into the fifth month, this movie's never going to see the light of day. There's a wonderful moment that happened in August of 1984. Hector was being, pushed by the New York Film Festival. Take your pick, opening night, closing night, whichever you want. But we have to have this film. Why? Because, his cachet from Pichot, Bill as a New York actor, Raul as a just towering New York figure. Both were on Broadway plays. Raul was doing 9, Bill was doing Hurly Burly, on Broadway. So they were, this was a hot property for the New York Film Festival, which was in September of '84. So I go to New York on this hot August day. I'm schlepping the fiber, boxes with the interlock, 1,000-foot reel interlock. So there's like 6 boxes, right? Because there's 17 reels, right? And the New York Film Festival, that crew of Lincoln Center people, they saw it at 9 o'clock in the morning, and so it was like, at that point, the film was running 2 hours and 50 minutes, something like that. Almost an hour longer than what you've seen.
Wow.
And I go to, I wait discreetly so that everyone's gone, and I figure I'll wait for the projectionist to.
Right.
And I go there, and the boxes are standing out in the corner. I said, "Boy, you rewound that fast." They walked out on the third reel, laughing their asses off. I said, "You got to be kidding." And it took me 4 days to find out the person who was kind of the interlocutor for the New York Film Festival, a Brazilian guy named Fabiano Canossa. He couldn't bring himself to tell me that they could not take this film seriously. It was a joke. And that was the first screening on that day. The next screening was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at a schlep. It was very hot. It was like I've never sweat so much schlepping, trying to get a cab with 6 boxes of fiber. And so we get to the next screening. And now this is Raul, the 2 agents, Jean Parsegan and Jeff Hunter, Fabiano Canossa, the Brazilian interlocutor, Len Schrader, myself. And Bill's going to watch it himself that night. He wants to wait till after the play. He's doing Broadway every night, and he'll rent his own screening room. So 3 hours later, the lights come up in a screening room on Broadway, and Raul Julia is sitting there. What happened to all our great work? What? And Jean Parsegan says, "You've got to do something to save the movie. This is a catastrophe. This is going to ruin both their careers." And Jeff Hunter was like, he wouldn't even speak to me. There was a third screening. Bill and Len. Bill and I were not getting along. He liked Len. And Bill's lady friend, another actress in that play, they started watching at midnight. And Schrader doesn't come back until the next day around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What happened? I thought you got mugged. He said, "Well, had to save the movie, Dave." I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, your troubles are over. Bill wants to buy the negative. He wants to burn it."
Wow.
Screening number 3.
Right.
So meanwhile, the next day, I get a phone call from Francisco Ramalho, who is the production manager, executive producer, they call him in Brazil. And he gave me some very bad news that Hector has cancer. Hector was he had just gone back to Brazil.
Right.
He had a biopsy, and he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This is all happening in one day. So, next question.
Not one of your favorite days, I take it.
Well, that's what it was like.
Right. So how long did it take to get the re-edit?
Well, interestingly enough, Bill and Raul threw themselves into this wholeheartedly. And for the next 7 weeks, me and Leonard stayed at my friend Jane Holzer's in New York, and we ran up bills at a dubbing studio. And while recutting, okay, we're dubbing. And this is like, I can't come up with a metaphor, but it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. I mean, you
Right.
can't, it's one or the other, right? Mm-hmm. And, but it gave an interesting opportunity to do some rewriting and take a piece here and a piece there and somehow reshaping. Mm-hmm. And not radical, it's very subtle. I always say that it's like a dewdrop on a blade of grass. You add one more, bam, the blade collapses. It was finding that magical pace and finding ways around certain dead moments and so forth. It was very, very delicate. But that was throughout the September and October, and mixed in New York in December. And I had an interlock screening here in Los Angeles in December with a mixed track for Je Jacob. And he asked to send the print to Paris, the work print, which I did. And then we get this astonishing telex. It's on the screen at one point. It's in French, but he's saying, it's hard to say. He's saying, we want to tell you that you're in competition in Cannes, but with two conditions. One, vous gardez le secret, nous ferons l'annonce. Keep it secret. We will make the announcement at a later date. Two, everyone here finds that in the second half of the film, in particular, there y a des longueurs. There are some lengthy moments. Snip, 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 snip. Okay, which is astonishing that the director of the most important festival in the world is going to tell you to cut your film. Mm-hmm. But there was something else he said that was even more interesting. France, Cannes, this speaks to the notion of this film being out of time, out of place. Cannes had a tradition, not official, but an understanding that each film that's in competition is from a specific country. Well, this is from Brazil, so French consider Brazil Tropicalia, you know? And there's the whole language issue. So what it says in the telex is, it's okay for the two main characters to speak English when they're alone in the cell, but the secondary characters should all speak Portuguese. And could you please have William Hurt, speak with the warden in Portuguese?
And either reshoot it or have it look horrible.
That's kind of like a Kafkaesque
yes.
nightmare that I don't know how I dealt with it. So I can't tell you.
Okay.
I don't know.
Blacked it out?
It's blacked out.
Well, considering you went from let's burn this movie from the lead actor all the way to you're going to be in competition at Cannes, I think you're allowed to black out some pieces.
I blacked out some, but that was just the beginning because Cannes is May of '85. Let's go forward another 10 months to March of '86. It was the first independent film to ever get the top 4 nominations. So it was kind of surreal.
Well, and independent film at that time didn't even really have that large of an imprint on the Oscars at all, let alone, I mean, it was a much different market.
Oh yeah, completely different. To try to explain it,
a giant leap.
It's a giant leap, but it was let's say it was an anomaly. Mm-hmm. My definition of independent, for example, the year before Amadeus, which Orion released, and Solzhenitsyn had his network of the best distributors in the world, who all anteed up. So basically, that's independent, right?
Right.
Well, that's one kind of independent. This is the independent with not a penny of industry money in it, and everything depends on the goodness of the film, as to whether it will ever be seen. None of us had any expectation that it would be seen. We just had to do it. I can honestly say that nobody, none of us, not one of us had a clue why we were doing this. It was almost like in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you know, that mountain, there's just something, right? That's it. No one, any one of us who says otherwise, it's not true.
Well, it was a really unique convergence of people and a really amazing accomplishment, and I was happy to have it screen on the big screen again. Thank you very much for sharing not only these photographs, but also your memories of it.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for this.
Sure. So, thank you all for being here. I suggest if you're interested, you should check out his documentary. It's really fantastic and very comprehensive. You also have maintained the collection of everything Spider-Woman.
Yeah, very briefly, I have, unintentionally over the 30 years, I kept every single frame of outtake, trims, outs, everything. Not just the masters that one normally retains, but I wound up keeping in storage simply because it was cheaper to just pay the storage than to put myself through throwing it out. And I never got around to it, and now I believe it's the only fully preserved 35 millimeter film with every single element ever, both in magnetic sound, 35 millimeter film, even down to 17.5 magnetic full coat. Everything. There's 600 and some odd boxes in storage. And so my goal is to turn that into an installation because I would say that maybe in 20 years from now, if we're still around, it will be the dinosaur bones of 100 years of
what filmmaking
was before.
Literally when it was filmmaking.
When it was film, yeah. Exactly.
Well, that's terrific. I hope to see that installation myself.
Oh, I think you will.
I hope so.
And if anyone wants to watch the documentary, thank you very much for mentioning that. It's called Tangled Web, The Making of Kiss of the Spider-Woman. Everyone, it's like everyone tells their story, and it's very explicit, and you can find it on vanishingcinema.com.
So I also hope that those of you who are enjoying this series come especially for La Cienega in 2 weeks. Lucrecia Martel, the director, is going to be here, and I think she is an incredibly singular talent and probably verging on auteurism, not a theory I necessarily subscribe to, but she's a really unique filmmaker. Her new film is the Argentinian candidate for foreign language film. I hope you come meet her. I think she's a really interesting woman, and we have more throughout this series of people who will be on this stage that you may or may not have heard of, and the voices and their experience will be singular. So don't miss another Monday. You guys were the smart ones here. Tell your friends. Thank you for coming.